Early in your book, you describe continuing to work on the Aspire Mirror project in your science fabrication class, right? Even after recognizing the ethical concerns, saying you still hope someone else might take care of the problem. And later, you write about wrestling with the idea that technology itself is apolitical, somewhere in chapter 3. So, as someone trained in electrical and computer engineering, I really resonate with that tension because I would always just focus on the technical aspect of the projects I build in my program, while deferring questions of biases and harm. So looking back now, what were the moments or realizations that help you move from building AI systems to challenging them publicly? As you would say in the book, you were coming from being a maker to being a critique. And what advice would you offer to people like me who are in the early parts of their career, research focus or technical, and trying to navigate that same tension today?
Not a softball, but a great question. I can tell you read the book, which I also appreciate. So I have to be honest, I really didn't want to deal with isms, sexism, racism, all of them isms. I just wanted to make cool tech when I came to the Media Lab, which is why I kept trying to apply to Lifelong Kindergarten Group. And they're like, civic media seems up your alley, But for me, I wanted to believe technology was apolitical. I knew humans were messy. That's part of why I wanted to do tech, right? I was like, I don't know about messing with social sciences and so forth. And so it felt like an escape. And it was a rude awakening that when I was working on something creative, the Aspire Mirror that is mentioned was an art project that I was making as part of a Media Lab class. And it was in that art project, exploring my creativity, where I literally couldn't be seen by a machine. And so I was confronted with the thing I kept running away from, which is the field that I love doesn't necessarily always love me back. And what do I do with that knowledge? Do I sweep it under the rug? Do I keep it moving? Which is what I had been doing, because in undergrad, when I worked on social robots, my robots also didn't see my face. It wasn't the first time. I just had hope by the time I got to grad school, wiser heads would have figured out some of these issues. And to your point, when did I decide, knowing that it would be a bit of a risk? And I was warned not to do this type of research. I was shown the bones of graduate students past who look at discrimination and bias and what could happen, right? And also well-meaning PhD peers and students, who are saying you probably don't want to switch since you just spent a year on another project. Very practical advice. And for me, I couldn't look away from it. I was haunted by that coding in a white mask experience and thinking, what could that mean in the future? So once it got its hold on me, I just kept doing side projects that involved that issue. And then the side project ended up becoming the main project. And I write about it in that first part of the book, going to Ethan Zuckerman, my supervisor, and kind of telling him that I know I've been working on this other project, but this is what's really drawing me right now. And at that time, Georgetown Law had released the Perpetual Lineup Report, showing that 1 in 3 adults, 117 million people in the US, had their face and facial recognition databases that could be searched by algorithms that hadn't been audited for accuracy. So I also couldn't tell myself that, it's just in the lab, somebody else is going to take care of it. And I have to say, is Natalie in the room? Natalie told me that Cathy O'Neil was coming to Harvard Bookstore with her brilliant book, Weapons of Math Destruction, and I should go and listen to what Cathy had to say. And that was right when I was teetering on the edge of, do I do this? Do I not do this? And so seeing Cathy already paving the way and talking about the ways in which algorithms can be destructive, all of those elements gave me courage to say, all right, this thing might be a little not so neutral after all. But it took me a while. It took me years to work up to it. And it did come at a cost eventually. And I think that cost is important to acknowledge. And so we're here celebrating the 5-year anniversary of the documentary. It's critically acclaimed and all of these things. But when the work was starting, this was not what was popular at all. And so it was really being willing not to have immediate support or validation, but doing it because I felt it was important to not just myself, but communities I cared about. And sometimes you're going to be in a position where people don't necessarily understand what you're doing, or they might devalue it. So many of my questions were often, why are you testing the faces of dark-skinned women? I never got that question when I was testing lighter-skinned faces, so why now am I getting those questions? So yeah, I hope that answers your question a bit, but it did take courage, and it continues to take courage, and it comes with real risk. We have Dr. Gebru. We have so many brilliant people, in this room, right? And she and I were laughing because in the film, it labels her as the ethical co-lead at Google. And we know that her important work talking about the limitations of large language models and so forth, she was kicked out for literally doing her job. And then she started the Distributed AI Research Network, doing incredible work there. Woo! Definitely a round of applause. So it's also having people like Timnit encouraging me to say, oh, this research is important. And when the people around me sometimes here didn't necessarily see its value, having outside voices see its value was also helpful. So shout out to my face queen. All good. Yeah.
Thank you for that response. Your journey that you detailed in your book, actually, where you're talking about the tension of including the social and ethical dimensions of technologies. But for me, your story actually was the reason why I started pursuing that certificate that explores the social and ethical implications of emerging technologies. So you were struggling before, and you've inspired probably a lot of people, especially the students, my peers back at Duke. So yeah. All right, let's open the floor to the people. People at the front, yes, please go ahead, ask away.
Yes, please.
Hi, my name is Geneva Jonathan. I am a clinical psychologist at Harvard Medical School, Mass General. So I have a 2-part question for you. As a psychologist, one thing that I felt was missing, but I haven't seen the whole film, was a talk about predicting mental health. So my background is machine learning, predicting how people act based on how they use their phones. And there have been some really great papers by Tom McCoy, Roy Perlis, out of MGH, looking to predict risk in suicide, as well as depression severity using clinical notes. So the largest study just published in September looked at 405,000 clinical notes and tried to predict a risk score 0 shot out of ChatGPT. And what it found is that Black and Hispanic people were 9 times more likely to predict, or they predicted it 9 times more likely that these individuals would ultimately commit suicide. It was not accurate. And so my question for you would be, how do we begin to address this? Because it was based off of over 30 years of clinical notes. And we can't go back and undo clinical notes. I'd like your point at the beginning of this screening is data is historical. It's there. We are using it to predict. So what would you say is the best way, especially as like the electronic medical record? There's Epic. There's a whole bunch of other different types of and forms of electronic medical records out there. What's the best way to address this in clinical notes moving forward? But then the second piece is I am obviously probably working in AI. Yes, I am. And I'm working on that with my team now. Right now, we're focused on OCD and related disorders. What's the best way as we're building tools for clinicians to use? What's the best way to be trying to train these models? There's a huge thing called, I think it's called purple teaming, where you have clinicians going in and typing things that they know to try to train this model. But it's, I'm one of the only Black psychologists at Mass General. Maybe the only, who knows? I haven't looked recently. How can we do this? How can we do it in a way that's not biased? Especially when everything that's going in right now is extremely biased. So 2 questions. Thank you so much. This has been fantastic. I can't wait to tell my team to sign on tomorrow.
All good. Thank you so much for that question. 2-part question. So in the film, I do mention that the past dwells within our algorithms. And if we're looking at medicine, right, we know that there's so much bias. It wasn't, I think, until 1993 or thereabouts that women were even mandated to be part of clinical trials. So if we are using historic medical data, the outcomes are going to be as you shared. And I think that's really where we start, acknowledging the limitations. That's a big part of the work of the Algorithmic Justice League, saying before we use a tool, let's see if it is fit for purpose. And let's also look at what the data comprises of, who's included, who's not included as well. I know Dr. Gebru's done great work with things like data labeling and so forth. So actually know the ingredients. Too much of AI ends up being mystery meat. So if we're putting it into the mystery meat machine that can be ChatGPT from time to time, the outcome's going to be that school lunch. You don't really know what's in there, right? So I think that's really important. The other thing I often hear, and I think it's well-intentioned, right, is how do we get rid of bias? And as long as humans are involved, unless you got rid of the humans, I don't know if you're going to get rid of the bias. But we can be more intentional about our values and our awareness. So I think what you're doing is the biggest thing that I continue to learn is the importance of telling your story. So you just even sharing that happened, right? Now other people can think twice before they assume, oh, we have a good intent. We're trying to do something good with AI here, and it's data-driven, not going to be as biased, and yet here we are. So I think those are all important starting points as well. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Anna Gifty. I'm currently a PhD student at the Harvard Kennedy School studying policy and economics, also the author of a book called The Double Tax that Joy has.
An amazing book. Please tell them more about it. Woo-woo. She was just on NBC Live talking about her work.
So the book is actually quite complementary to Joy's book. So it explores the compounded costs of racism and sexism and what we all stand to lose by ignoring those costs. So I would love to ask a question that's a little bit more geared towards what my dissertation is about.
Okay.
So I'm curious about how AI is informing the hiring process right now, and essentially what sort of direction we should be going into with respect to like designing interventions to sort of mitigate the bias that we know is baked into existing hiring patterns that are just kind of scaled by these machines. Thank you.
All good.
Oh, sorry.
No worries. So AI and hiring, I think the stories we tell about AI, not just the actual capabilities of AI, we see influencing AI in the workplace and hiring as well. So a big thing I'm seeing are hiring freezes because there's so much uncertainty, right? And then also betting on machines instead of betting on people. An example that always comes to mind is NEDA, the National Eating Disorder Association. Some time ago, I read a headline, I think it was on a Monday, NEDA replacing call center workers with a chatbot, right? And call center workers, they wanted to unionize, they wanted better benefits, all of those, the typical things. Those who had decision-making power decided they didn't want to deal with that. And at the time, just like now, you're hearing so much hype about what AI can do. AI can replace all of this, right? And so they replaced these call center workers who were actually trained to respond to people with eating disorders. So I think that headline was a Monday. I don't even know if we got to Friday. Might have been Saturday. The next headline was Meta shuts down the chatbot. Wait, what happened? Turns out the chatbot was actually giving people information that's known to make eating disorders worse. And this happened not because necessarily of the capabilities of AI systems, though we continue to track that, but the stories we believe about the capabilities of AI systems and also our proximity to work or lack thereof, work we're unfamiliar with. So the less you know about what it takes to perform a particular role, the easier it is to imagine it can be done by AI systems. Or maybe in your own life, you maybe try to pick up somebody else's role, think, it can't be that hard. Next thing you know, okay, a little more respect for what it takes. So those are some of the ways.
Thank you. Someone at the back? The guy wearing the...
Yes, we want gender inclusion here.
We'll go to you and then there's...
Thank you. I'm Jadel. I'm a PhD candidate in the MIT Sports Lab. We work on automated officiating with the NBA. And so my question for you is, you're seeing a change in the sports world right now where tennis has got rid of all their line judges, soccer is semi-automated, and now I'm in a position like helping out basketball, and NFL is working on similar things too. So what do you think about like full automation where, the goal is there are biased referees that you want to get rid of bad calls and bad plays, but then to your point about like data and making sure you have the right information coming in to make sure that it's not making it worse overall. How do you think about semi-automation versus full automation and your thought process there?
Have you read Unmasking AI? Because it's full of sports analogies all over the place. I used to be a pole vaulter, basketball player, cross country, all of that. So I love this question. Okay, so when it comes to automation within sports, it's often around fairness, right? So we've seen people losing it over bad calls, shifting the game, all of that. I think I like where tennis is at because it is kind of giving a little bit of automation as well as some human decision making. So the calls are automated, let's say for a line call, but if you want to challenge it, you can. However, they give you a limit on how many times you can challenge it. Right. And so I think finding a balance of constraints in that way can be helpful, and you have to experiment with it. And these tennis players have some really sharp eyes. So sometimes you think it's out, you or in, and when they actually challenge it, you'll see that they were right. And given how high stakes it is, a Wimbledon, a US Open, thanks to all this advocacy, women being paid, the same amount, we're talking quite a bit of money here. So those calls definitely make a difference. I also want to point out, we continue to connect with different athletes. Dr. Trapp is here. And this summer, we actually worked with Jaylen Brown's foundation, Juice Foundation, over at the Media Lab, where we hosted students in the area to do different workshops on STEM, including our facial recognition workshop. I don't think I've seen Jaylen have so much fun except for on this 3-game winning streak. I don't know, from third to they're doing a lot better. So we'll see. Hopefully we can get another banner in Boston for sure. But if you're doing sports and AI, please come talk to me.
All right, we'll take
one over here.
Oh. Yes, thank you. Okay, so my name's Alex. I'm just some random IT guy. But
Hey, Alex.
Thank you. So my question is, there's a company called Axiom, and currently they're trying to use police body cam footage to correlate to active warrants. So this is going on in Canada, but Axiom is an American company, so I have no doubt that they're just testing that over there to bring it over here. And I was just wondering, how can we address that? Because they want to use AI as like a backdoor to the Fourth Amendment.
So we've seen different versions of police body cams being used, and the idea is to have some kind of accountability, and then we'll see body cam footage mysteriously disappearing and so forth. Now, if you have the body cameras, there's a question of can you use it to triangulate and so forth. I think all of it tends to be speculative. Like, wouldn't it be great if this technology could do X, Y, Z, and let's adopt it in the name of safety? Yet when we actually look at how it's being implemented or whether or not it's been shown to be fit for purpose, or if even communities want this, that tends to be where we run into some issues. So for any kind of policing tech in the first place, there should be public deliberation. Too often we just see these technologies deployed on us, and out of nowhere now we're having to resist. We recently released a report called Comply to Fly. We've been doing a 2-year study on the use of facial recognition technology by TSA. And kind of like what you're mentioning with Axiom, who asked for this? And then suddenly you're confronted with the technology. And I think it's important to continue to resist. In the film, because we were raising awareness, we had the research from MIT, we were working with organizations like the ACLU, like Fight for the Future and so forth. We actually got Amazon, Microsoft, and IBM all to stop selling facial recognition to law enforcement. And that's because we were raising awareness, bringing the data. And we were also in a moment when you're thinking about 2020, right, where there was an increased awareness of racial injustice. We're in a different moment now, but I think resistance now is even more important. I'm also kind of laughing because that company asked me to be on a advisory board for them. And they acquired a facial recognition company, and the CEO of that company reached out. They're like, he didn't say this, was how I read it. He's like, I wanted the money, but I feel bad now. So I hope nothing goes wrong. Will you join this board so there's at least some oversight? Like, I can't help you on that front. But in that conversation, there were really interesting technical pieces about surveillance, like real-time surveillance versus near real-time surveillance. And I got into this because we thought about launching a safe face pledge with companies like Microsoft and Facebook and so forth. And when it came to surveillance uses of AI, and in particular facial recognition, there was always a question of what does real time mean or near real time. And so we tend to see sometimes when legislation is introduced or policies are introduced, we get dilutions over time that defang what would otherwise be substantive protection. So great question. Also was born in Canada, as is Deb Raji, who you see in the film. She just messaged me saying she had a delayed flight, but is trying to get here, nonetheless. So all good. Thank you for that question.
All right. Thank you for the questions. It's amazing to see how diverse the careers and professionals and the industries that are affected by AI systems nowadays. Dr. Joy, thank you for your time and the well-thought responses and the work you do through Algorithmic Justice League. Please join me in thanking Dr. Joy Buolamwini.
Thank you. Not the standing. Thank you. Really appreciate it.